Okay, let's dive right into this explainer where we're going to unpack the complex and honestly often misunderstood legal mechanisms behind U.S. citizenship revocation. Most people assume that once you take the oath and officially become a naturalized citizen, that status is absolutely locked in and permanent. But the reality of immigration law, it's far more intricate than that. Today, we're going to explore exactly how those protections can be stripped away, and we'll do it by examining a really shocking, high-stakes fraud case recently brought to light by the Department of Justice. It is a fascinating look at what happens when the very foundation of someone's citizenship is built on a hidden truth.
To truly understand the stakes here, we have to start with this massive number, $2.5 million. We're not talking about a minor paperwork error or a little misunderstanding on a form. This is the exact amount that 62-year-old native of India, Debashish Ghosh, is accused of conspiring to defraud from his investors. When we talk about denaturalization, the underlying actions that catch the government's eye are usually pretty substantial. And a multi-million-dollar financial conspiracy? Yeah, that certainly fits the bill.
So what was this money actually for? Well, according to the Justice Department, Ghosh collected this funding under the guise of building an aircraft maintenance facility. It was pitched to investors as this legitimate, high-value infrastructure project. But, and here's the kicker, the DOJ alleges this was entirely a fraudulent scheme. And what makes this so absolutely crucial to our explainer today is the timeline. Ghosh actually started orchestrating this massive financial deception before he even became a naturalized U.S. citizen. Think about that. He was actively running a fraud ring while at the exact same time asking the U.S. government for permanent legal status.
All right, let's move right into Section 1, the timeline of deception, and track Ghosh's actions.
When it comes to citizenship revocation, timing is literally everything. As you can see, the initial fraud conspiracy began prior to 2012. Then, right in the middle of this ongoing scheme, Ghosh went through his naturalization application and the mandatory interview in 2012. But the story definitely doesn't end once he got that citizenship. Post-2012, the DOJ states he just kept the ruse going, actively misrepresenting to his investors where their funds were and how safe they were. This continuous thread of deception, spanning from way before he was a citizen to long after, is exactly what triggered the present-day DOJ revocation complaint.
Moving to Section 2, the pivotal lie, and what specifically happened in 2012.
When you apply for U.S. citizenship, you have to answer a series of incredibly direct questions, and you do it under penalty of perjury. In his 2012 application and interview, Ghosh explicitly claimed he had never committed a crime or offense for which he had not been arrested. Now contrast that with reality. According to the Justice Department, at the very moment he checked that box and swore that oath, he was actively conspiring to defraud investors out of $2.5 million. He wasn't just hiding some past mistake, he was actively concealing an ongoing, major financial crime from federal immigration officers.
Let's dive into Section 3, the mechanics of denaturalization, where we'll unpack the law.
So, what legally happens when the U.S. government uncovers a foundational lie years or even decades after citizenship is granted? Well, this is where we get into the heavy legal framework of denaturalization. Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, a naturalized citizen's status isn't just a permanent, untouchable guarantee, especially if it was procured illegally. If citizenship is gained by hiding a material fact or through willful misrepresentation, the government actually has the statutory authority to essentially rewind the clock. They can revoke the citizenship and cancel the certificate of naturalization. It's kind of like saying, actually, scratch that. The contract was void from day one because it was signed under false pretenses.
So how does that apply specifically to Debashish Ghosh? The DOJ's complaint relies on a few specific statutory grounds, which we've laid out here. First up, concealment of a material fact and willful misrepresentation, because obviously he hid his ongoing fraud. Second, falsely testifying during his proceedings. And third, and this is a really big one in immigration law, the requirement to demonstrate good moral character. The government's argument is that by committing a crime involving moral turpitude, which is basically just a legal term for an act that's inherently unethical, like massive financial fraud, during the time he was required to show good character, he completely disqualified himself from citizenship.
Which brings us to Section 4, the DOJ enforcement crackdown, and the broader context of this case.
Zoom out with me for a second, because Ghosh's case is definitely not an isolated incident. 12. That's the number of individuals the Justice Department's Office of Immigration Litigation has targeted in this current sweep, initiating action in district courts to revoke their naturalized citizenship. This shows a serious allocation of resources by the DOJ to look back into historical naturalization records and root out individuals they believe obtained their status fraudulently.
To get a sense of the government's official stance on this sweep, we can look directly at this statement from Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. He stated, individuals implicated in committing fraud, heinous crimes such as sexual abuse, or expressing support for terrorism should never have been naturalized as United States citizens. You can see how this quote clearly groups large-scale fraud right alongside other very severe offenses. It really illustrates the DOJ's perspective that hiding major, disqualifying actions fundamentally undermines the integrity of the whole immigration system.
Expanding on the context of these enforcements, Blanche also explicitly outlined the current policy directives driving this. He stated, "The Trump administration is taking action to correct these egregious violations of our immigration system. Those who intentionally concealed their criminal histories or misrepresented themselves during the naturalization process will face the fullest extent of the law." We're neutrally observing a clear signal here, a zero-tolerance administrative approach toward any applications that were approved based on concealed historical information.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought. As enforcement tightens and administrative priorities shift, how effectively will the government actually be able to track historical fraud in naturalized citizens decades after the fact? With evolving data analytics, digitized records, and way deeper financial investigations, could cases like Debashis Ghosh's just be the tip of the iceberg? It raises some really fascinating questions about the future of immigration enforcement and whether any long-buried secrets from our system's past can truly stay hidden forever. Thanks so much for diving into this complex topic with us today, and as always, keep questioning the systems around us.